Hello viewers, this is your host Nurse Roslyn Odhiambo on Skills versus the Midwife. Welcome all. In today's video we are going to discuss about the placental exam. Now this forms part of the very last stage of labor. Remember we have 4 stages of labor, 1, 2, 3, and the last one is whereby now forms part of the 4 hours immediately after the delivery process is complete. And part of what we do is to examine the placenta. Now there are reasons why we examine the placenta, and number 1 is to determine the completeness, because sometimes we can have retained parts of the placenta in the uterus of the mother. Secondly, we want to determine if there are any abnormalities and also complications that could have happened during the pregnancy period. And therefore we are going to, before me here we have the placenta. So this is our placenta that we are going to use in our examination today. So let's follow keenly. Having understood the reasons why we perform a placental exam, then we are going to start off. So the first thing we are going to do is to assess the umbilical cord. So this is our umbilical cord. Oh, this is our cord clamp. Remember we actually clamped and cut the cord, and the baby was taken away. So this is our umbilical cord, and when you look at the umbilical cord, it's normally covered with a whitish substance, and the whitish substance is what we refer to as Wharton's jelly. So all umbilical cords normal should be covered all the way with Wharton's jelly. It's normally creamish in color, creamy white in color, and that is what we expect to see on the surface of the umbilical cord. When we continue on and look at the surface, okay, when we look at the surface of the surface of the cord here, we expect to see 3 major blood vessels, and these blood vessels include the 2 arteries and 1 umbilical vein. The one that normally will continue oozing blood is the vein, and therefore we expect to see 3 blood vessels, 3 major blood vessels. If we are missing, for example, an artery, that could suggest that there's a problem with the kidney, probably a condition like renal agenesis. And therefore, for the cord, we have the blood vessels and also the Wharton's jelly. Then we continue on to talk about the nodes. So on the cord, we also assess on the nodes, and we have categories of nodes. We have true nodes, and we have also false nodes. So for the false nodes, they look like swellings that form around the umbilical cord, but they don't have any harm, as opposed to the true nodes, which actually form in real sense. Okay, all of us know how to tie our shoes, so it actually forms like a true node. So the danger of a true node is that if it is tightly formed, then it can actually prevent the enough adequate blood supply and oxygen and also nutrients to the growing fetus. So we need to be keen to observe whether we have true nodes on our cord. All right, and then further to that, we are going to estimate the length of the cord. So the normal length, the normal average length of the cord is between 45 and 55 centimeters, averagely at 50 centimeters. So if we have a very long cord, it also has disadvantages. All right, so we can, for you to do that in the clinic, where you are in the clinical area or at the ward, you can improvise. You can use strapping. You label it, and then now you can come and measure, or you can just straightforward use the tape measure, but after you finish with it, then you can clean it up for the next person to use. So what normally happens if we have a long cord, then we can have complications like the cord going around the neck of the fetus, and if it is very tight around the neck, then it can actually strangle the baby. And something else, we can have other complications like cord prolapse and also cord presentation. And sometimes when we have a very short cord that is below 45 centimeters, then we can have problems like when the fetus is moving around in utero, then it can pull, and we can end up having conditions like placental abruption. And during delivery, because the cord is short, when the baby is being delivered, then it can actually pull and come out with the uterus, so we can have uterine inversion. So those are a few complications that can come with either a long or a short cord, a long or a short cord, and including the knuckle cord, which I've already explained. All right, so now let's move on. We have talked about the cord length. We have also talked about the blood vessels and everything. Now let's talk about the cord insertion. So we need also to check, all right, it's it's good to also find out what kind of cord insertion we have, all right, because there are some cord insertions that their anatomical way that they have been formed would actually prevent adequate blood supply to the growing fetus. So our cord insertion in this case is actually central. We have other types of cord insertions. We can have the marginal, we can have the battle door. On the side, we are going to talk about anatomical variations. And for this case, we have a central kind of cord insertion. Now, let's talk about the membranes, all right? On the placenta, we have two major types of membranes, okay? Fetal membranes. So we have the chorion and the amnion. Let's characterize each one of them. So we have the amnion, which is normally on the fetal side, on the fetal surface, and we also have the chorion, which is on the maternal surface. What about the amnion? So the amnion is opaque. The amnion is translucent. It is, when you tear it, it tears towards the insertion where the cord has been inserted, and also it's very tough. And what about the chorion, which is on the maternal surface? It is opaque, it is easy to tear, or you can say it is friable, and when you tear it, it tears towards the edge of the placenta. Okay, so now we have those two membranes, and I try to become as creative as possible. So we can actually separate the two. We can separate the amnion from the chorion, and we can actually confirm some of those characteristics for each that we have discussed right now. Okay, now let's turn onto the maternal surface and discuss a little bit of what kind of assessment we'll be doing on the maternal surface. For starters, the placenta itself, we can actually determine or measure the diameter and also the width. So the expected diameter of the placenta, is normally, the normal is 20 centimeters, and the width, okay, the width of the placenta is 2.5 centimeters. So the depth, okay, the depth of the placenta is 2.5 centimeters, while the diameter is 20 centimeters. So on the maternal surface, just from observation, we are able to see that normally what we expect is for you to see the appearance is dark red in color. All right, it's dark red in color, and when you look at the surface carefully, you'll be able to see that we have lobes or cotyledons. So the lobes or cotyledons that are seen on the surface of the placenta, they are normally different books or reference material will give us a certain number, 18 to 22, 15 to 20, 15 to 22, all right? But I would like to put it and emphasize that it's not about the number. The reason why we want to count the lobes and to ascertain that they are all there is because one lobe could have been retained in the mother's uterus. So the reason why we are checking on the lobes is not so that we can count them, is so that we can see or find out is there any missing lobe so that we can know the next course of action. But all in all, sometimes you realize that there are too many of them. There are too many lobes. So the only thing that you can sit back and conclude is that the more the lobes, then the wider the placenta is. So probably you can say that, okay, probably we were going to have a macrosomic baby because the placenta is very big from a diabetic mother. Yes, so it's not about the number so much, but it's about whether or not you are missing a lobe or two so that you can act immediately. All right, then further to that, we have the lobes. Aside from the lobes, we also need to check on other aspects. On the maternal surface, we realize that sometimes we can get white patchy areas. Now the white patchy areas, they are specially called infarcts. Now infarcts on the placenta are areas that were not well supplied, okay, with oxygenated blood at some point. Probably this, probably at some point during pregnancy, maybe the woman was had an infection or had an issue that led to the reason why we are not able to supply enough oxygen within or at the placenta. So we have infarcted areas that look whitish in nature. Right now, there are also other whitish areas that are almost similar in appearance to infarcts. They are also called calcifications. Now, towards the end of pregnancy, we expect calcifications. to be formed. All right, so calcified areas on the placenta, and the calcified areas, they are not very smooth, they are actually rough because of the calcium deposits. Now this is expected because it explains that the placenta has aged, and therefore when we have calcifications, it only means that this placenta has aged and it needs to the pregnancy is actually ended and the placenta has to come out. So calcifications are normal. It only becomes a problem when it occurs too early during pregnancy. So please note there's a difference between infarcted areas and calcifications. Okay, still on the maternal surface, sometimes you can observe that there are a lot of clots on that surface. So when there are a lot of clots, then you can suspect that probably during this pregnancy, this woman might have had placental abruption, and that is why we are having accumulated clots on the surface. Okay, so that is for maternal surface. We have talked about calcifications, we've talked about infarcts, we've also talked about clots, and also lobes and or cotyledons, and we've seen that if we have deviation from the normal, we can make a conclusion very fast and act and remedy whatever problem there is. Okay, let's move on to the fetal surface. So this is the fetal surface, and when you from the outward look, when you observe the fetal surface, is normally shiny and it has blood vessels running through it. Okay, the fetal surface has blood vessels running through it. So you can actually visualize them just like my placenta here. And for starters, we need to look at how those blood vessels are running. So there would be a problem if the blood vessels are running up to the edge of the placenta. Why? Because if they run up to the edge, then it could be that they could have been supplying maybe another lobe. And so if I'm doing my placental exam and I realize that the blood vessels are running to the edge and there's nothing here being supplied with blood, then I need to act very fast and ask myself, where could this piece, this lobe be? And therefore I need to go back to the mother's bedside and find out if there was anything that was retained. And therefore the blood vessels should not run to the edge, to the edge. They should only run up to somewhere near the margin of the placenta. Okay, let's talk about blood vessels still. So these blood vessels, sometimes you'll realize as they are running across the placenta, they run also through the membranes. They run through the membranes. Now this is a very serious condition and it's called velamentous insertion of the cord. Now with velamentous insertion of the cord, what normally happens as a complication is that during labor, when we have uterine contractions, what will happen is that if we have those membranes stretch, then the first thing that is going to happen is excessive. Actually, we call it exsanguination. We are going to have excessive bleeding that will lead us to a condition we call vasa previa. So we need to observe the blood vessels. Are they also running through the membrane? Because if they are running through the membrane, we need to be alert to note that we are going to have a serious complication called vasa previa. Okay, I hope we are together. Let's move on to the anatomical variations of the placenta. We are going to talk about a few of them. And anatomical variations of the placenta, some of them are not serious, others just, you see, the structure, the anatomy. It may not really imply anything serious, but sometimes we may need to worry about a few of them because they can lead to serious complications. So the first anatomical variation of the placenta is what we call placenta circumambulate. Okay, so when you have placenta circumambulate, when you hold your placenta up like this, normally we expect the membranes to fall down and hang. But in circumambulate, placenta circumambulate, the membranes are actually doubling up on top of the surface of the placenta. So these membranes are not hanging down as we expect. They are actually doubled up on top of the surface of the placenta. There is no serious complication that is attached to placenta circumambulate. Let's move to the next one. We have placenta succenturiate. With placenta succenturiate, we have our normal placental structure, but we have another small lobe or structure on the side. So the danger of placental subcentoriate is that this small lobe on the side that is also being supplied with blood at the same time can actually be retained in the uterus if it cuts out or off. So it can be retained, and that can be dangerous because any retained products of conception can lead to serious bleeding in the postpartum period. Okay, now that is placental subcentoriate. Then we have bipartite placenta. So we have our normal structure of the placenta, but there is also a similar one in size and shape that is attached on the side. So we have two similar structures that look like a placenta, all right, and they are connected with the umbilical cord. Then we also have tripartite. Tri simply means three. So we have that placenta, similar structure as the placenta, but two more. So there are three. Tripartite. We have three similar structures that look like the placenta, and they are all joined by one umbilical cord. Then we have the one that I've just spoken about, the filamentous insertion of the cord, whereby the blood vessels run through the membranes. And because they run through the membranes, they can easily rupture and cause excessive bleeding, leading us to a condition called vasa previa. We have yet another one that is called battle door variation. So with the battle door, I believe some of us here in this forum, they play table tennis, yeah, and you've seen the bat that is normally used in table tennis. So our placenta will look similar as that bat. So this is the battle door presentation, and like I was explaining initially, the importance of actually assessing the cord insertion is that we are able to understand any insertion that is at the edge will limit the blood supply, okay, to the placenta, and therefore we'll have insufficiency. We're going to have placental insufficiency. All right, so those are some of the anatomical variations. In another forum, we'll discuss about the placental complications. Let's continue on. So we are going to proceed on to measure the blood loss. So we have delivered our mom, and now we want to finish off, but we can't finish the placental exam without looking at the blood loss. So the blood loss is measured based on the amount of liquid blood that has been lost. We also have blood in form of clots. So we have clots, we have liquid blood, and we also have blood that needs to be measured that from the gauzes that we were using. In the delivery pack, we have gauzes, and the gauzes, we use them wiping the face of the baby, inspecting the vaginal orifice, and making sure we can even use the gauze to pack. And these gauzes, they come in contact with blood. So as much as possible, we need to measure the amount of blood loss that has also been seen in some of these gauzes that we have used. So how do we measure liquid blood? We can improvise a measuring jar in the clinical area, and then we calibrate it. After calibration, or we can use a calibrated one, then we pour the liquid blood inside there. All right, once you pour it, all of it, then you can measure. So for example, if you've poured your liquid blood and you realize it is 200 ml, so note it down, liquid blood is 200 ml. Now there's a reason why we don't measure liquid blood the same way as clots, and I'm going to explain that. Once you've measured the liquid blood, you can pour it out, collect all the clots that you have around, put it in the measuring jar the same way you did with the liquid blood, then measure. For example, it reaches a point where you're measuring the clots to be reading at 100. So we are not going to record 100. For clots, it's normally heavier, so we are going to do times 2. So we measured the blood, it was 200 ml. Now we are measuring the clot, we have put it in a jar, and it is reading at 100. We will not record 100, we are going to record 200 because blood clot is heavier. So we have already 200 plus now the clot, which is now coming to 200. I hope we are together. Then let's come to the gauzes, and you can do this experimentally back in your workplaces or in school. Take one fully soaked gauze. Okay, you can even put it in water and do an experiment. Then squeeze it out and take a 20cc syringe and withdraw the amount of fluid that you will get. You'll realize that a fully soaked gauze will measure 20 ml. Partially or halfway soaked gauze will measure around 10 ml. So all this, when they are put together, we will be able to compute how much of blood loss you have. And it's important for you to do the blood loss because For starters, we are worried about conditions like postpartum hemorrhage. So when we have postpartum hemorrhage, then we have a landmark. When we have a woman who has delivered normally through spontaneous vaginal delivery, then PPH, our warning sign for PPH is at 500 ml blood loss. While for those who go for cesarean section, the blood loss that will be a warning sign for PPH is at 1000 ml. I hope we are together. So then that is blood loss. After we do the blood loss, then we measure the weight of the placenta. The weight of the placenta should be ideally a sixth of the baby's weight. But we need to be creative enough, get a weighing scale. You can put this in a polythene bag if you have the one that you hang, so that you're able to read the measurement. Whichever way, you can still go ahead and measure the placenta, but it should be a sixth of the baby's weight. Then we are going now to plan on disposal of this placenta. All right, now we need to be very careful in this stage, because there are the women whose culture may not be very, we may not be aware of some of these cultures, because some of them may want to carry their placentas home, whatever they do with them. I hear there are some cultures that actually prepare this as a meal. I don't know, go home and find out. And there are other ways we can dispose of the placenta. We can incinerate the placenta. We can also macerate. Some would opt to bury. Okay, so whichever way that we feel is safe enough for us to dispose the placenta, then we will go and do it. And that depends on also the policy of the hospital. There are some who macerate, there are some who incinerate, there are also some who do what? Who actually bury, and others normally have a placenta pit, so they throw them in the pit. But again, make sure you inquire. There are people, there are cultures who may not want you to go away with the placenta, so you need to be very careful. All right, so as we finalize this, we need to see how we are disposing of or taking away our linen. Remember, we had linen in our delivery pack, and we also had the instruments. So what are we going to do with the instruments and the linen? We normally have jig solution that is prepared in our sluice room, so just make sure that you soak them before they are cleaned up and repacked and taken back to the CSSD. And for the instruments, soak them also in jig for around 10 minutes, and this is something that we have learned even in our fundamentals, so it's not new to us. Soak them in jig for 10 minutes, then you can clean them in soapy water, and then rinse them out, then dry them up, pack them, and take them back to the CSSD for sterilization. Otherwise, I believe this session has been fruitful to us all, and continue looking more for more videos, and I encourage us to keep reading and practicing some of these skills. Remember, we are planning to become better and proficient midwives in the future. Otherwise, thank you very much. See you in the next video.